Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds. And may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure, immaculate Ahlul Bayt. A word of apology to start off with. In relation to the congregational salat today, I wasn't supposed to come to lead it, so sorry if I kept people waiting. Then they told me at 8:30 that I have to come and do the salat, so sorry about that. I think this is very loud now. It's okay?
It's loud.
No.
It's not loud enough.
Okay.
You're saying it's not loud.
Okay, it's okay. Okay, continuing from last night. And for those who weren't here, we're speaking about the status of women from the Gnostical point of view primarily. But we'll touch on a number of dimensions. And today, inshallah, the focus will be in relation to how the traditions have spoken about the creation of Eve, alayha salam. But before that, just a few introductory points, continuing from last night. So we said that one important mystical point to bear in mind when discussing the creation of man and woman is that the essence of what we are is the spirit. The spirit is called a man when it has X anatomical features, and it's called a woman when it has another set of anatomical features. We said sex is a function of one's anatomy, and therefore anatomy being a physical reality, sex is a function of the physical realm of existence, this world. We are a man or a woman in this world. You're only going to be called a man or woman for 70, 80, 90, 100 years. It's confined to this material realm. All succeeding realms of existences are matter-free, they're immaterial. And these physical, biological, anatomical criteria will no longer apply then. So, in Barzakh, in Qiyamah, it's you and your actions in immaterial realms of existences. Only here is the physical realm. And therefore, manhood or womanhood is only specific here. They won't persist. They bear no meaning in other realms of existences. You're not a man or a woman in Barzakh anymore. You're you and your actions. All those actions that you did, embodying in a certain different forms. So one may structure this into the following syllogism. The first premise, sex is a function of one's physical, anatomical, private parts. Second premise, there's no physical matter in the realms of the hereafter. Conclusion, one's sex has no meaning in the hereafter. So being male or female in the hereafter is not applicable. Although, yes, some people may say the second premise, it's controversial. Some people believe that Qiyamah, majority of theologians believe, that Qiyamah is a physical reality. And I'm not trying to force you into believing this. It's a very legitimate position that in Qiyamah, it's a physical reality, and therefore there, manhood and womanhood would have a meaning. But according to the Gnostics, this second premise, they believe all succeeding realms of existences are matter or physical matter free. Now, the idea that sex is not essential to what or who we are is a secondary reality to what we are in essence. It's not essential to what we are. Can be supported by medical data, medical modern experiments too. I'll try not to bore you too much, but I have to speak about this a bit, I think. In the 1950s, there was this Russian scientist who, at the same time when there was the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States, at the same time there was another race in the medical domain in relation to brain transplantation. The Russians started off here too, like with the space race, where this Russian scientist transplanted the head and forelimbs of a puppy onto a Siberian adult husky, which is a breed of dog. Actually, I've presented this paper in the State University of New York about 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. And actually, they liked it quite a bit. I presented the same paper at Manchester University. Yes, they didn't like it. Yes. No. But since you're American, and I'm assuming that you will like it, inshallah. So they put the head and the forelimbs of a puppy onto the adult Siberian husky. Now the post-operative notes, these are documented papers, the post-operative notes showed that the puppy was very violent and wanted to separate from the husky and even attacked the ear of the husky and bit it. But given the circumstances, it's a natural reaction after detaching its head and forelimbs onto it. And that suggested that there are two different psychologies here. It's one body, but we have two different psychologies, two dog psychologies in this case. But then, years later, an American neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, performed brain transplantation in monkeys, where the brain of one monkey, let's call it monkey A, was transplanted into the body of monkey B, the brainless body of monkey B. Now, before this transplantation was to occur, they would teach monkey A a few things, a few tests, Pavlov style. And then after the operation, they wanted to see that this monkey, which was the body of monkey B, but the brain of monkey A, if it was monkey A, if those tests were recalled or not. And the monkey only lasted living for a few minutes. It didn't take too long. But it did recall what it learned when it was monkey A, in monkey A's body. And that shows that the eye follows where the brain goes. Now, that's just an introductory point to why sex isn't essential to our essence, to the eye. So brain transplantations are a reality. And actually, I recall once in Rome, I had gone to many philosophers and raised this dilemma. And many philosophers of different trends in philosophy kept on telling me it's impossible, this brain transplantation. And they would use some philosophical argumentation, and they were adamant. Some of them have been teaching that brand of philosophy, so to speak, for many years. But I kept on telling them, it's happened. These things are happening now. So we have to be careful when we read philosophy or Irfan. It has to have some practical benefits to society. It shouldn't just be a theoretical read. So, imagine then, one day this technology will be perfected. You get my brain, Farrokh's brain, and you put it into a female brainless body with a female phenotype, then you ask that apparent female, what's your name? She'll say Farrokh. The eye follows the brain. It's the same me. All my memories were the same and in continuity. My mother is my mother. Then you ask the female, so what do you do? Well, I've been in Rome for the last 10 years. You see? That new Farrokh is now 46XX. Save for the brain, that's still 46XY. But on the whole, it's 46XX. It's female now. The eye is the same. The gender to start off with is the same too, because gender is a function of one's psychology. So to start with time, it may change with the hormones and everything. But the sex differs. So sex isn't essential to what we are in essence. That is a legitimate conclusion to make. However, if I were to have the operation, then my marriage will be made void immediately. Because marriage is a worldly contract. And being a worldly contract, sex is a prerequisite. We have to be of different sexes. Yes, in Barzakh, in the hereafter, marriage has no meaning. Has no meaning whatsoever. Criminal law has no meaning. There's no law in the hereafter. It's immaterial there. It's you and your actions embodying themselves. But law, marriage, these kind of things are all confined to this realm of existence. And since marriage is a worldly contract, you need a man and a woman, and sex is a function of one's anatomy, yes, once I become a woman, once Farrokh becomes a woman, then the marriage is void. There. So that was just to explain that sex isn't something essential to who or what we are. Okay, now on the creation of Adam and Eve, especially Eve, the focus is here on Eve. There are lots of traditions on this whole phenomenon here. And they're very diverse. And to assemble them, to make them compatible, isn't an easy job. On the whole, Islam isn't for the idea that the physical Eve, Hawa alayhi salam, was created from Adam's rib. It's not impossible, okay? It's not impossible to create someone from someone's rib. Especially today with genetic engineering and stem cell therapy. It's very easy now, but with miracles, instead of going through all the different steps from A to B, takes some time, it occurs immediately. Because bones are a source of stem cells. But anyway, I'm getting medical tonight, I think. On the whole, though, it's not for the idea that Eve was created from Adam's rib. But not to say that it's impossible to happen, but it's not for this idea. And because the overall logic of the traditions point to the fact that Allah, and we'll come to the tradition in a minute, is free from such a description. Now, there are three positions here in relation to, well, there may be more, but I found three amongst the different works of scholars. There are three positions in relation to the creation of Eve, and we'll go through them with their argumentation a bit tonight. One says she was created from clay, but she was created anew from clay, not from the remains of Adam's clay. And we also, secondly, we have the position that, no, she was created from Adam's rib. And thirdly, she was created from the remains of Adam's clay. So these are three different positions here, which need to be explained. The first one, that she was created from clay, but not from the clay, the remains of Adam's clay. It was from anew. Here there's a tradition. There are many traditions supporting this. The key one is from Zurara ibn Ayyun, where he says Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was asked in regards to the creation of Eve, and was told that there are people who say, Imam Sadiq was told, that there are people who say Eve was created out of Adam's left rib. This last meaning the most inferior, left rib. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, immaculate be Allah from what they ascribe. He is greater than what they say. Do those who state such a thing believe that Allah did not have the capacity to create Eve from other than Adam's rib, enabling people to reproach by saying that Adam has married with himself? Then the Imam said, Inna Allah ta'ala lamma khalaqa Adama min teen wa amara al-malaika فسجدوا له ألقى عليه السبات ثم ابتدأ له هوا. This is one of the key parts to this tradition. So verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created Adam, whilst ordering the angels to prostrate before Him, He made Adam go into a deep sleep, subat. ثم ابتدأ له هوا. Then the key word here is ibtada. It means creation, but creation from anew. He brought Eve into existence, a new existence though. The prima facie meaning of ibtada can relay this new creation, supporting the idea that it wasn't from the remains of Adam's creation. It was something new here. It's a different reality. Same constitution, clay, but from a different clay. Then on becoming aware of her creation, Adam asked Allah, who is this person whose sight and closeness is a source of affinity to me? Now, this isn't a sexual form of affinity. This was first sight now. There was no mention of sex here. And this is very important to note that we may come to later, maybe tomorrow or the day after. It's very important here. On seeing Eve, there was a form of attraction towards Eve by Adam. He was attracted to Eve. This form of affinity is very important. And the reason, I'll come to maybe later. Allah said, this is Eve. Would you like her to be with you, to be a source of affinity to you, to speak with you and to follow you? Adam alayhi salam replied, Na'am ya Rab, wa laka alayya bidhalika alhamdu wa shukr ma baghid. Yes, my Lord, as long as I am alive, displaying gratitude to you because of this creation is necessary upon me. There's a very delicate point here. That should be our motto today. But I'll explain that more. So, in this tradition, we see that it explicitly indicates that Eve wasn't created from Adam's rib, and this is not on a par with the proper etiquette that Muslims should observe before Allah. It indicates that she was created anew, from anew, and not from Adam's parts or from the clay that Adam was created from. And then once we appreciate this from this tradition, then verses have to be interpreted in a certain way. خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. He created you from a single substance and then assigned its mate from it, minha, from that substance. Now this min is the key preposition here. Min has many different meanings. We have something in Arabic called the constitutional min. It means from the same constitution, not necessarily from it per se, although that also does have some prima facie relevance. And then this verse says, ثُمَّ جَعَلَ, implies an antecedence in time. Just because one was created later or after another, this has no bearing on one's status or degree. Just because someone, is formed later. And actually, as we'll see, some of the Urafa say actually being created later has more of an effect, even in status. The status is higher. We'll come to that, I think, today, inshallah. But in general, time has no relevance to one's spiritual or social status. Or chapter 42, verse 11, فَاطِرُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. The originator of the heavens and the earth, and He made for you mates from your own substance, your own constitution. So here, and with other verses too, the Quran wants to put forward the idea that Adam and Eve were created from the same substance, from the same entity. And this is what matters. Their origins, their destination, their potential is uniform, is equal. Neither is superior to the other. And this is one conclusion that Ayatollah Jawadi Hafadahullah brings in his tafsir. Now, in contrast to this first position, now we go into the second theory. And it seems, according to some of the fuqaha, that there are authentic traditions that seem to indicate that yes, Eve was created from Adam's rib, and they're authentic. And that Allah converted that rib into the flesh. And this is on a par with verses of the Old Testament too. That's how the Christian tradition portrays it. In fiqh, in jurisprudence, there's a discussion they have in relation to hermaphrodites. I'm not sure if you use the same term here in America. Hermaphrodites, they have both sets of genitalia, male and female. The ruling in relation to them is very important in many domains in fiqh. In one of them, it's in the domain of inheritance. If someone is a hermaphrodite, having both, do they inherit as a man or do they inherit as a woman? It's important because there's a difference in inheriting. Here, there are a number, before, with the help of the traditions, there are a number of signs to help assign the hermaphrodite to one of the two sexes. So that when they want to inherit, they say, you're not a man or a woman, but in inheritance, you have the same ruling as a man, or the same ruling as a woman. There are many different signs. For example, the first sign is from which urinary outlet do they predominantly urinate from? If it's from the female urethra, you're a woman. If it's from the male urethra, you're a man. You inherit therefore as a man. And then in fiqh, it goes in, there are so many different branches. For example, they say, what if someone asked the imam, what if they urinate from both of them predominantly? The imam then said, well, from which one do they urinate from before the other? From which one do they urinate first? If they urinate from the female urethra, it's a woman, inherits as a woman. And then someone asks, what if they urinate from both at the same time? Then the imam says, from which ends last when they urinate? And it keeps on going. I'm sorry, it's become a very medical discussion tonight. Sorry about that. But now, these are all signs. One sign, assuming none of these, they're still not certain from which sex to assign this hermaphrodite. One sign, which is an area of controversy. These signs were unanimous amongst the fuqaha, but one sign, which is an area of controversy amongst the fuqaha, some accept it, some don't, is if none of those signs are, you still don't know which sex to assign the hermaphrodite, how many ribs do they have? Do they have the same number of ribs on each side? If they do, it's a woman. If they don't, it's unequal, it's a man. And we have these kind of discussions. But the important point here is this, that yes, this tradition many people have accepted and they've employed it in fiqh. As I'll just give it one example. And that doesn't have to be problematic though. We can still make it compatible with the other positions in the following way. Because we said that it goes against the logic of the Quran in relation to how the Quran views the creation of Eve. Okay, to say that she was created, and against the logic of the traditions too, explicitly, to say that she was created from Adam's rib. And the most inferior left rib too. What do these all mean? We don't have to accept the explicit meaning of this tradition. We take it into ta'wil to make it compatible with the explicit traditions and the logic of the Quran. So we can, at the same time as saying that Eve was created from clay, now whether it was new clay or the remains of Adam's clay, we can still interpret this leftness and make it compatible with those other positions, without having to say she was actually created from the left rib of Adam. Sometimes when we see two traditions, explicit traditions, going against one another, you can take one and the other you can interpret esoterically, making it on a par with the first. This is legitimate. Many scholars do this. Here, this leftness has to be described. The concept of leftness, what is all this about? What does left mean in the Quran? What does left mean in the traditions? We have left and we have right. Allah has right hands. Our a'mal, our deeds are given for some people in the left hand, for some people in the right hand. When according to the Gnostics, we have no left or right hand in the succeeding realms of existences. There is no physical body. What is all this referring to? Is left referring to a more deeper reality? The answer to this I found in a book which is a commentary to Usul al-Kafi. It's called Wafi, Al-Wafi. It's by Faiz Kashani, rahmatullah alayh. And it was incredible. After 10 years in the Hawza, it was the first time I had referred to this book, this year. It was in relation to something else. And it's an incredible book, where a lot of the meanings of very delicate traditions of usul al-kafi is highlighted in a very interesting ways. Now, I'm not saying it's, revelation, I'm not saying it's 100% true or not, but it deepens one's understanding. We don't have to be adamant and say this is, especially in these particular matters, that this is the truth, period. It's very difficult to say that, and there's no need. As long as what you say is on a par with the proper Islamic standards and criteria, it's acceptable. Anyway, so what does being left mean in the text? Maybe, on careful scrutiny, one observes that any association with the left is usually negatively interpreted. It's always negative. It's an association, an affinity with other than Allah. If you look where left is used in the Quran, where left is used in the traditions, in many traditions, leftness is associated with an affinity with other than Allah, with worldly matters, for example. Being left is usually negatively interpreted. So this is a theological discussion, nothing to do with politics here. Here, you just need to go through different traditions, verses of the Quran. You see that the right is always positive. The pious are given the books, the account of their deeds, in the right hand, and they are pious, the companions of the right hand. Where those who weren't pious will be given to the left hand. Maybe. Now, the tradition said Eve was created from Adam's most inferior left rib. What does most inferior mean here? Maybe it means, well, let's first say what left means. So this left rib may be indicative of, esoterically, affinity with the worldly life that was part of Adam in his creation, and Eve did not have. And this was passed over to Eve to have as well. But how much of it goes to Eve? Very, very little. The tradition is the most inferior left rib. What passed on to Eve was very little attachment to other than Allah. This is one interpretation that some people have. Otherwise, left, qua left, has no important significance. The traditions say, enter the mosque with your right foot. Eat food with your right hand. You've all heard of these, but maybe you confined it only to the external dimension. It's mustahab to eat with your right hand, for example. Okay, first question. What if someone is left-handed? You can't force them to eat with their right hand, can you? Say, no, the tradition says, right, get their hands, and no, you can't do that. They want to eat with their left hand. They're left-handed, for goodness sake. The way, if you confine it to the external dimension, well, he'll get distance from Islam, the way you portrayed, as if there's a kind of anti-leftism movement. Rightness means affinity with Allah. Leftness, affinity with other than Allah. When you eat with your right hand, recall Allah when you eat. I'm not negating the external meaning. That's there too. Okay? But the main meaning, the main esoterical meaning is when you eat with your right hand. So when you're eating, recall Allah when you're eating. That's of value. Not the right hand because it's right hand. So here then the left-handed person says, oh good, yes, I'm also part of the picture now. Because I can recall Allah. You just look at the different traditions we have entering the mosque with the right foot. All these different things. These are possible ways to explain these kind of. As I say, everything in fiqh, everything in jurisprudence. Jurisprudence is the most essential step. You can't live without it. But you shouldn't confine yourself to the external dimension of jurisprudence. If you do, life can become very dry at times. All fiqh, all of it, every single part of it has esoteric dimensions. And it wants you to go to those. It's a conduit for you to reach these esoteric dimensions. Some people do wudu for the sake of wudu. Okay? They get confined in the whole water business. They get confined only with keep on, wiping, washing. There's no recalling Allah. There's no dua. I don't know if I should say this. No. Yes. So we can accept those traditions too, which says Eve was created from Adam's most inferior left rib, but we have to explain it more. Then there's a third position where here the position is that Eve was created from the remains of Adam's clay. So the difference here is that here it says from the remains. In the first position it said from clay, different clay. From clay, it was also from clay, but from another clay, not from the remains. Here the key tradition here is from Amr ibn Abi Miqdam, who narrates from his father, who says, I asked Imam Baqir alayhi salam, from what did Allah create Eve? He replied, what do the people say on this matter? I said, they say that Allah created her from one of Adam's ribs. He then exclaimed, they're wrong. Was Allah unable to create her from other than Adam's rib? I continued and said, may my life be ransomed for you. So what was she created from? And then the Imam replied, my father narrated from his fathers that the Messenger of Allah said, قَبَذَةً مِنْ تِينٍ. Allah took a portion of clay, فَخَلَتَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ, and then he molded it or blended it with his right hand. Now, Allah has no hands. The right hand is in relation to recalling Allah, those divine attributes. It was a positive makeup that Allah created Adam from. فَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا آدَمَ, and created from that clay Adam. وَفَضَلَتْ فَزْلَةٌ مِنَ التِّينِ, and there remained an extra amount of clay. فَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا حَوَى, and Eve was created from that extra, that remained from Adam's clay. So, in relation to the first and the third position, they both say that they were both created from clay. And it's the same substance. Now, what this clay is referring to, outside the physical clay, it was physical clay too. It has other dimensions too. That requires a more deeper discussion, which I'm not prepared now mentally to go into. But they were created from the same substance. Whether Eve was created from a new or from the remains, the same substance. And Ayatollah Jawadi says this itself shows that the origins, destination, and potential, therefore, is uniform. There's no superiority in either one. The origins are the same. Okay. Now, before we continue, just one marginal point, that these verses which do support, and these traditions which do support the fact that the origins are the same, from the same substance, when was this revealed? It was during the time of ignorance, the era of ignorance, Jahiliyyah. You just have to look through the texts of historical books of previous civilizations to Islam, just to see how they value the woman, how they regard the woman, how much the woman is looked down upon. And then suddenly Islam comes and says they're totally equal. Their origins, their destination, and their potential. This was something new. Now, there were previous religions which were divine. The message, though, was distorted. The texts were distorted. Women were exploited endlessly. In some civilization, they weren't even regarded as humans. After the death of the husband, they had no rights. You just have to go through history. And then Islam comes with this message. This is the important part. Okay, today, alhamdulillah, we don't have any distortion of the text. We may have malpractices in our Muslim cultures in relation to how we view the woman. But alhamdulillah, the texts are there. Islam is still living. And also it's worth noting that just because, I've mentioned this before, someone is created body-wise, if X is created before Y, doesn't mean they're superior in any way. Okay. Now here, some of the ulama have taken it one step forward. And this is a question of taste, maybe. One of them was Ibn Arabi here. Women, throughout his futuhat, he tackles this question. And even in one chapter, he describes how he viewed women before, and then what was granted to him from Allah when he saw the reality of women, and then how he viewed them after that. And then he gives very interesting commentaries to many traditions, which I'll come to, inshallah. We'll start that tomorrow. But he went one step maybe forward. He wants to say that the Eve was superior to Adam. And from that, the woman's creation is superior to that of man's. Now, this is interesting to note. His reasoning is of interest. I'm not saying this is fact, but there's something important lying in his words here. He says that the evolving and succeeding copy or creation of the original bears more value. We have creation, we have procreation. We were all procreated. None of us were created. We were procreated. Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam were procreated. There was no mother or father. Were created. In procreation, there's a mother and a father. The Arabic is tawalud. In creation, there's no mother or father. Okay? We were all procreated. Adam and Eve were created. So with that introduction, Prophet Isa alayhi salam was which one? Created, yes. Just to make sure everyone's listening. So Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, also was created. There wasn't a father and a mother together. Okay, now, what Ibn Arabi is suggesting is this, that maybe in creation, the succeeding, the evolving copy of the original creation, the evolving, succeeding creation emanating from the original creation is of a higher status. It's superior. And then he said it's even more comprehensive than the original. Because this is creation now, it's not procreation. Our children may be better than us. They may not be better. But with creation, it's all Allah involved here. When something is created from the original, he wants to suggest there's something different here. And he says it's superior from the original creation. So maybe he's of the opinion that Eve was created from the remains, maybe. I don't know. And I haven't read anything from him in this regard. But then we ask him, okay, can you bring some support? It's a nice statement. And then he brings this support. Verse 91 of chapter 21. It's in relation to Mary alayhi salam and Jesus alayhi salam. Everywhere that Jesus is mentioned in the Holy Quran, it's always Isa ibn Maryam. It's never Isa. We have Ibrahim in the Quran, Musa, and other prophets, just by name. But with Isa, we never have Isa alone. I can't recall it, maybe, but mostly it says Isa ibn Maryam, Isa ibn Maryam. And also in the traditions. I mean, you may find one or two, I can't recall any. It's always Isa ibn Maryam. The stress is on that it's Jesus, son of Mary. And there's no procreation either. It was creation, but the terminology used stresses, you say Isa ibn Maryam. In chapter 21, verse 91, so we breathed into her our spirit and made her and her son one sign for all worlds. One sign. It's one reality. Lady Maryam alayhi salam and Prophet Jesus, it's one reality here. This one sign has many different interpretations, so this is one of them. And Jesus alayhi salam was procreated, emanating from Lady Mary. And he was of a higher figure. Ibn Arabi wants to make the same comparison with Adam and Hawa. And in chapter 3, verse 59, Inna mathala Isa indallah ka mathala Adam. Verily, the story of Jesus is like the case of Adam. Now, here, the exoteric meaning of this tradition, which it's not negatable, we accept it, is that they said Jesus was God, and Allah wanted to show, look, but Prophet Jesus had a mother. With Adam, though, not only did he have no father, he had no father or mother, but no one says Adam is God. That's the exoteric interpretation of this. Ibn Arabi wants to use this esoterically to prove his point, that Jesus emanated from Mary, Jesus was of a higher figure, and in the story of Adam, Eve emanated from Adam. So Eve is like Jesus, he wants to put forward. He wants to kind of bring the superiority of women here in such a manner. Okay. Now, I'm not saying this is, a firm thing. I respect Ibn Arabi. It's a very interesting thing. It's a good take. It's of taste. It brings new esoteric dimensions to the verse. This verse, 59 in chapter 3 of Al Imran, he's touched on this verse in about 10 different ways in his Futuhat. And each one of them is a different way. 10 different ways of this same verse. All of them esoteric dimensions. However, I'm not in a position to say Eve was superior, but this new manifestation, which is called Hava, Eve, was something incredibly vital for mankind. That we don't deny. Mankind came through her. Mankind survived through her. She was the final divine step, if you like, the seal of biological proofs. With her creation, now mankind starts and will continue until the day of resurrection. There is something important there. We can't, undervalue that. It's a very important creation, this. With her creation, the stamp of biological proofs has now been given. And in relation to women in general, look, the late Ayatollah Khoui, rahmatullah alayh, when it came to who is the mother, in contrast to the majority of the fuqaha, he said the owner of the womb is the mother. So in surrogacy, if you want to do surrogacy, which is have a surrogate mother and everything, that's okay, you're allowed in Islam. But the mother will be the surrogate mother. Look, the cytoplasmic unicellular embryo in the womb of the mother. After 9 months, it becomes, at one cell, becomes, something like 3 to 3.5 kilograms. Or I think you work in pounds usually, around 7 or 8 pounds. A single cell. Where does that 7 or 8 pounds come from? It's all extracted from, the roots of the mother, the blood, the food, everything. It's all the mother. Pardon? Yes. And then, after birth, she breastfeeds. After 6 months now, it becomes 20 pounds. This is very important here. The mother is the owner of the womb, according to him. The owner of the womb is something extremely important. Look at orphans which are brought up by their mothers alone. They had no father, they were fatherless for whatever reason, and they were brought up by their mothers. And then compare them to children who were motherless and brought up by their fathers. With the latter, the motherless ones, usually, no one take offense, but usually, they're not very balanced. Because they didn't have a mother. But fatherless children who were brought up by their mother, they become marriages. A lot of our marriages, including Imam Khomeini, it was fatherless. It was the mother. From the beginning, it was the mother which nurtured him. And there used to be a very good custom in Islam. It's dying down now, where someone has a nursing mother too. The more the mothers, the better. Why do they stress on the nursing mother? A good, pious nursing mother. You see, this aspect of Eve-ness wants to be conveyed to the child. It's very important, the status here. And so this demonstrates the essential role of the mother. Okay. We'll come, inshallah, later, either today or I think tomorrow, on how this one fact demonstrates the ultimate role of women in society. From this one fact and one tradition annexed to it, we come to interesting conclusions. One last thing, in chapter 49, another one of Ibn Arabi's interesting observations was in chapter 49, verse 13. يا أيها الناس, O humans, إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى. We created you from a male and a female. He wants to say from this verse, all forms of creation and procreation are alluded to in this one single verse. So he really dissects it now. He says, O humans, okay, indeed we created you. We created you, referring to Adam's creation. From a male, referring to the creation of Eve. And from a female, relating to the creation of who? Of Jesus, creation of Jesus. And then from a male and female, all else, procreation.